how do you know that what Jesus was doing is requirements of the Messiah?
That specific requirements of Messiah?
Yeah.
Context clues.
That's not telling me anything, brother.
So you're asking me, like, where does it say word for word, this is what the Messiah will do?
Yes, where it explains to you, this is what the Messiah will do, and then boom, we see Jesus doing it. Or this is who the Messiah is going to be, and then boom, we see that Jesus fits that identification. Or boom, this is where the Messiah is going to be born, and then bam, Jesus is born in that place that the Messiah is supposed to be born. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Off the top of the dome, I haven't memorized the Quran yet. I can't tell you exactly which verse.
Okay.
Where it says it.
I can help you. I can help you. You don't have a single place in the Quran that gives you this information. There's nothing in the Quran that tells you why or how Jesus is the Messiah. It just identifies him as the Messiah and just tells you to go along with it. It doesn't tell you how.
Right. So because it doesn't tell you exactly how he's the Messiah and what the Messiah's job is, that disqualifies him as the Messiah in Islam, in your opinion?
No, it just doesn't justify it. It doesn't give a reason for me to believe that Jesus is the Messiah other than a claim. You know what I'm saying? And like this was something that Jesus would come to the Jews and he would say, if you don't believe me, then believe the works that I do. Or he would come and so he's giving evidence. Or he would say, if you would have believed Moses or the prophets, you would believe me because they wrote about me. So Jesus is saying that I'm coming fulfilling what has already been spoken. The job that the Messiah was supposed to do, the description of the Messiah, Jesus is saying, I'm fulfilling those. So that's how you know I am he. But with the Quran, with it isolated by itself, we don't get none of that. We don't have any connection to any messianic mission statements, any messianic prophecies, we don't know how Jesus is the Messiah.
Right. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I would my response to that would be that in Allah's infinite knowledge, it wasn't necessary in the Quran for him to say Jesus is the Messiah because this and fulfill messianic prophecies, because the Quran is the final revelation given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So it wasn't that detail doesn't need to be like really explained in the Quran. You know what I mean?
Well, let me
as we both know, there's previous scriptures, and in those previous scriptures, it could have described Jesus, the next coming prophet that was going to come. You know, you feel me?
Absolutely. So there's two problems with it. You're right. You're on a good track. But here's some things here's some problems. Okay. First problem is that the Quran claims that it is a detailed explanation of everything. Okay. So
it also says there are verses that are not explained though. Like in that same verse, it says
not in the same verse, it says that elsewhere. So therefore, that means that there's a contradiction that we have. So either the Quran is a detailed explanation of everything, or there are verses that are unexplained. You know, it can't be both at the same time.
Right. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
All right. So that's the first problem.
I'm gonna get this context to it. Go ahead.
Okay.
What's the second part?
So that's the first problem. So the first problem is that the Quran does not give us details of the Messiah, who he is, what his mission is, why he's the Messiah. It doesn't give us those details, which will go against what the Quran claims about itself. That's problem number one. Problem number two, the Jews, they reject the Messiah according to the Quran, right?
Right.
What is the punishment of the Jews for rejecting the Messiah according to the Quran?
Off the top of the dome, I'm trying to think what the punishment was.
But it's hellfire because they're disbelievers at this point, right?
Right.
So it calls the Jews disbelievers for rejecting the Messiah and opposing Allah. Them opposing the Messiah, they oppose Allah, and that's why it says they plotted, they deceived. Allah deceived, and he's the best of it, right? He beat them in plotting against the Messiah. Allah plotted against them instead, right? So they're going against Allah by going against the Messiah. Now,
correct.
It would make sense. I mean, to me, it makes sense. Hopefully, to you as well, that Allah calling these people disbelievers for rejecting the Messiah would provide evidence why Jesus is the Messiah. Right?
And Jesus performed multiple miracles and things like that.
How do you know that that's a messianic requirement, that the Messiah will perform miracles?
Not necessarily that that's a messianic requirement according to the Quran. Like it doesn't, like you said, the word for word doesn't say these are messianic prophecies that the Messiah will fulfill word for word in the Quran. But in the Quran, it does explain that he does miracles and things like that, and preaching of oneness. Plus, they were sent previous prophets.
That don't mean nothing. That don't mean nothing if you don't know what the mission of the Messiah is. If you don't know that the Messiah is supposed to be working miracles, Jesus performing miracles means nothing with this. What's that got to do? It got nothing to do with this.
Well, I would assume that at the time of those Jews, that in the scriptures that they had, there was some sort of description of the Messiah that they would have distorted, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does say that the Jews, they did distort their own books. They distorted the Torah and stuff like that. So I would assume that there were verses that described the Messiah and they distorted those things.
You're right there. You would assume that in their books, they would have had descriptions of the Messiah that they probably are either ignoring or trying to delete or cover up. But in their books, in the previous scriptures, it has the descriptions of the Messiah, and that's where the proof is, right?
But the description, as in like we have them today, you're saying, or like at that time they would have had it?
At that time they would have had it, because the Quran says it came confirming what is with them. Right? So they had the Torah, they had the Injil, they had the writings of the prophets, so they have no reason to reject the Messiah since they have these scriptures.
They wouldn't have, well, the Injil was given to Jesus. The Jews wouldn't have had the Injil at that time. They wouldn't have had it.
Well, Jesus is the one bringing the Injil to the Jews, right?
He preached the Injil.
Yeah.
So I've seen your previous videos where you say is the Injil written.
Well, yeah, it's not about that right now. Orally. Yeah, no worries. Not about that right now. Just keeping it simple. Jesus brought the gospel, the Injil, to his fellow Jews, correct?
He preached it to them, yes.
Yes, and some believed and some believed, right?
Yes.
All right. So you have some of the Jews are rejecting the gospel, rejecting the Injil. Some of them are accepting the Injil, accepting the gospel. What we have here is we have within the books, not just the Injil, but the ones prior to it that the Injil came to confirm, the Torah, the Zabur, the Psalms, the writings of the prophets. In these books, the Jews have it in their possession. Jesus has it in his possession. And these scriptures foretell about the Messiah. They give the descriptions of the Messiah. Making sense?
Yeah, what are the descriptions that are given?
There, man, now you're asking some good questions. What are the descriptions that's given?
I'm asking.
No, yeah, that's a good question.
I'm not fully familiar with everything inside the Torah or everything.
Of course,
you know what I'm saying?
Of course. Here's one example. Here's one description of the Messiah here. And this is the one that you can agree with.
You can do Isaiah 53?
Nope. Well, that's one, but you would disagree with that one. Here's another one, though. We are in Isaiah, though. But this is what Isaiah says, or this is what God says in Isaiah. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel in the Hebrew, which means God with us. So here we see the birth of the Messiah being foretold of a virgin, right? Now, here's the important part, though. Notice what he's called. He's called God with us.
Is that in the literal sense, God with us, or as a messenger, you're preaching God's word?
Oh, no,
you're supposed to
you can't be a messenger and encompass the presence of God. It's God. That would be blasphemy. God himself is with us. Now, here's the important part that I need you to settle in on. The fact that you're identifying Jesus as the Messiah, who's born of a virgin, where do we get that from? That the Messiah is supposed to be born of a virgin? From the previous scriptures. And in that same prophecy about the Messiah, it identifies him as God with us. God himself is going to come in the flesh and be born of a virgin. This is who you're saying Jesus is when you say he's the Messiah.
I mean, our definition of Messiah is different.
You can't just take the word Messiah that comes from the scriptures and then redefine it in your way. You can't do that. That's not how language works.
Right, but like I said, I would have to look at the context of God with us, like that meaning of it, because there's multiple people called sons of God throughout the Bible.
Yeah, but
Israel's
none of them are identified as God himself. God being and God with us. None of them. Here's another one. Isaiah 9:6. Have you heard this before? Isaiah 9:6?
Off the top of the dome, no. I would have to hear you.
All right, this is what it says. It says, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." So
you said that's Isaiah.
That's Isaiah chapter 9.
Isaiah 9.
Verse 6.
Okay.
So we have another verse where the Messiah, the son to be born of the virgin, is identified as God himself. Twice. This is who you're saying Jesus is when you say he's the Messiah.